Shock. Russia's capitulation. Putin apologized to Aliyev for the downed plane in Moscow on his knees. The end of the great empire. The Caucasus and Central Asia spit on the Kremlin. Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Azerbaijan are throwing off Putin's shackles. China, Europe, and Turkey are taking Russia's place. The bunker dwellers are completely losing their influence in the world. This is the twilight of the Kremlin. I'll tell you all the details in a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine. Today it's me, Victoria Panchenko, and the latest events. Sensational news. Putin admitted to shooting down the Azerbaijani plane, but also blamed Ukraine. During a meeting with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, the Russian dictator essentially admitted that the Azal passenger plane was shot down by Russian air defense missiles. Putin made the corresponding statement in Dushanbe, where he met with Aliyev on the sidelines of the CIS summit. The Russian dictator added that the causes of the plane crash were allegedly connected, in particular, to the presence of Ukrainian drones in the sky. Putin's apology to the president of Azerbaijan for the passenger plane shot down in 2024 is not a diplomatic gesture, but a symbolic capitulation by Moscow. This was written on October 9th by Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council.
At the time, right after the crash, I immediately reported that it was a missile from the Russian air defense system. And this fact was picked up by foreign media. Moscow, however, lied, claiming it wasn't them. 38 people died in the crash, including citizens of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Kyrgyzstan. For 10 months, Moscow lied, inventing stories about bad weather conditions, flocks of birds, and technical malfunctions, but under pressure from Baku, the Kremlin was forced to admit the obvious. The plane was destroyed by Russian air defense missiles.
The head of the Center for Countering Disinformation noted that Putin's apology demonstrates a shift in Russia's position on the international stage.
Russia has been weakened by the war against Ukraine and is not capable of entering into a conflict with Azerbaijan and Turkey. The Kremlin's attempts to pressure Baku through the arrests of the diaspora, media companies, and agents failed and had the opposite effect. Azerbaijan acted consistently and firmly, with Turkey, a key partner and guarantor of strength, standing behind it.
Putin's apologies became a signal to Russia's neighbors. The Kremlin can no longer dictate terms, but is forced to justify itself and take other players on the regional stage into account.
The era of imperial arrogance is over. Russia is no longer a center of influence, but a vulnerable player that is now forced to reckon with those it considered its junior partners just yesterday.
The war against Ukraine is destroying Putin's influence. The countries of the former empire are gravitating toward the US and Turkey, as stated in a Bloomberg article. According to Alexander Gabuev, director of the Carnegie Russia and Eurasia Center, this turn away from Moscow is driven by fear.
The countries are trying to minimize risks and are looking for ways to distance themselves from Russia as much as possible.
Over the past 2 years, China's trade with the 5 Central Asian republics has grown by a third. In June, Chinese leader Xi Jinping visited Kazakhstan, and in August, US President Donald Trump invited the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan to the White House after helping broker a peace agreement between them. Turkey is also seeking to take advantage of new opportunities. Recently, President Erdogan took part in the Turkic-speaking countries summit, which was held in Azerbaijan. And in April 2025, EU representatives held talks with the leaders of Central Asia.
Russia can no longer project power abroad when all its resources are being consumed by the war in Ukraine. Their capabilities are stretched to the limit, and the main priority is the war.
Competitors are putting maximum pressure on Moscow. China is expanding its influence through the Belt and Road Initiative and has already become the largest trading partner of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, the 2 leading economies of the region.
Russia is now much less visible in Uzbekistan. The Chinese are filling this void without hesitation.
And it's not just about China. The European Union has established a strategic partnership with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, and has launched an investment program of up to 12 billion euros to develop transport routes, extract critical minerals, and support the energy sector. The Central Asian countries have also pledged to strengthen controls to prevent the circumvention of sanctions against the Russian military-industrial complex. Aliyev also made an unexpected move. Azerbaijan has come to Ukraine's defense. And a real shock for Putin, the supply of weapons and ammunition to the Ukrainian armed forces is becoming a reality. Russia's influence in the Caucasus has completely collapsed. The Kremlin is losing control over the region, and this is only the first blow in a chain of catastrophic defeats. All the details are coming up. Don't miss it.
Azerbaijan may lift the embargo on supplying weapons to Ukraine and send its Soviet-era equipment to the front. And media reports have emerged that Azerbaijan is launching serial production of artillery ammunition for Ukraine.
Azerbaijan has accumulated quite a substantial amount of weaponry, much of it dating back to the Soviet era. This includes not only older armaments, but also the more modern and sophisticated weapons that Azerbaijan has actively purchased and acquired since the successful deoccupation of its territories. To say that there is a huge amount of weaponry there, considering the scale of our front and the conduct of the war, of course not. But for Azerbaijan, these numbers are quite substantial and impressive.
After the Russians shot down an Azerbaijani plane over Nagorno-Karabakh and did not admit responsibility for what they had done, Azerbaijan took the path of war. President Aliyev publicly sided with Ukraine and called Russia an occupier.
I don't think this resonates with the aspirations of the Ukrainian people to never agree to occupation. That is the main piece of advice. That's what we did.
I think that in Azerbaijan itself, people remember very well who brought war to their land. Formally, yes, it was Armenia, yes, the occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh, but it was the Russian Federation that provided full military, political, and financial support to our adversaries. Yes, and moreover, who controlled the occupied Nagorno-Karabakh through so-called peacekeepers? Well, the Russians.
At the Mishos Forum in Beijing, Aliyev shook Putin's hand very coldly and demonstratively refused to talk to him.
That was an unprecedented act against our people. We are not responsible for the deterioration of relations. We respond constructively and lawfully, but we will never tolerate any signs or manifestations of aggression or disrespect towards us.
In Russia, they didn't lag behind either and began to brutally crack down on members of the Azerbaijani diaspora. The security forces even killed 2 people.
Some of the victims had their ribs broken. There are those who suffered spinal and internal organ injuries. If Azerbaijan had not intervened, the number of victims could have been hundreds of times higher.
In Baku, several journalists with pro-Russian views were arrested and accused of having ties to the FSB and Russian intelligence. They were alleged to have carried out intelligence-gathering activities on Azerbaijani territory in the interests of the Russian Federation. So in other words, this was a kind of symmetrical response.
But the real blow below the belt was the signing of a peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia in the United States. They completely ignored Russia as a permanent partner and mediator. Russia's influence in the Caucasus is fading away.
Armenia and Azerbaijan commit to permanently cease hostilities, open up trade, establish transport links and diplomatic relations, and also to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The Russian Federation feels the weakness of its position. It senses that it is essentially unable to influence Aliyev or Azerbaijan in any way. And we see that it has started shelling gas infrastructure used by Azerbaijan already on the territory of Ukraine in the Odessa region.
Now Russia has begun to shell Azerbaijani oil depots and gas distribution stations in Ukraine. So far, Azerbaijan is providing Ukraine exclusively with humanitarian aid, but everything could change very quickly.
At the moment, we have provided humanitarian and financial aid totaling 40 million euros. And this assistance is ongoing. It is completely transparent and purely humanitarian in nature. We have implemented several social infrastructure projects in the city of Irpin and will continue to do so. You know that Ukrainian children regularly visit us as guests. We will do everything in our power to help.
According to insider information, there could be several hundred units there, not including Smerch and Grad systems. As for Smerch systems, I think there are about 80 or so. In fact, such a reinforcement of equipment in a specific section of the front could significantly strengthen our position. Plus, there are, let's say, hundreds of pieces of military equipment, still of Soviet design, such as the same APCs and IFVs, which would also be quite useful for Ukraine.
Given the ongoing attempts by the Russians to harm Azerbaijan, Azerbaijani weapons may soon appear on the Ukrainian front lines.
The EU, in turn, is developing new trade routes through regions that will allow goods to be transported from China to Turkey and further to Europe, bypassing Russia. Countries of the Persian Gulf are also strengthening their presence. Last year, Armenia froze its participation in the military alliance with Russia. Yerevan has also announced its intention.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
To join the EU. Moreover, Armenia is preparing to open its border with Turkey. An incredible rapprochement between the countries for the first time in decades. And all of this is because of the Kremlin. How Putin's policies are pushing Yerevan into Ankara's embrace. All the details coming up.
A major event for Armenia. After almost 33 years of isolation, the country is ready to restore relations with its neighbor and reopen their shared border.
There are no issues or delays on the Armenian side. We are ready to open the border and establish diplomatic relations as soon as tomorrow.
The Armenian-Turkish border stretches for a total of 328 kilometers, from the tri-point with the Georgian border in the north to the junction with the Azerbaijani border in the south. It has been closed since April 3rd, 1993, when Turkey unilaterally blocked the border, officially citing the occupation of Azerbaijani regions by Armenian forces as the reason. Back then, 30 years ago, the Ankara government promised to open the border only on the condition that Armenia would stop seeking international recognition of the Armenian genocide by the Turks and withdraw its troops from the conflict zone in Nagorno-Karabakh. And now in 2025, it seems that the disagreements between the neighboring countries have been resolved.
Experts believe that Pashinyan is trying to shift the focus away from territorial claims and towards attempts to build peaceful relations with neighbors.
Armenia has only very recently taken a sharp new course toward reconciliation with its neighbors. It was only in August of this year that an official ceremony for signing a peace agreement with Azerbaijan took place at the White House. The document stipulates that Baku and Yerevan renounce mutual territorial claims and also cease the use of force against each other. And now, just a month later, Armenia is ready to let go of old grievances and start a new chapter in the history of its neighbor, Turkey, by opening the land borders between the two countries.
This is something of an extended epilogue to the significant August 8th meeting that took place in Shinton, a pivotal moment when people in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and indeed many other countries across the region and beyond truly started talking about the potential arrival of a lasting peace. And perhaps this current development is a meaningful form of encouragement for Armenia, coming directly from Turkey.
However, experts clarify that the intention to open the borders should not be confused with the actual launch of local controls at the checkpoints. Despite Armenia's clear desire to be friends with its neighbors again, the decision to reopen the Turkish border will not be made by Armenia alone.
I think that Turkey will not make this decision without coordinating with Azerbaijan.
Experts note this. There is no breakthrough yet. The borders remain closed and trade only takes place through third countries. And even diplomatic relations have not been established. And the main reason is still the unresolved issues with Azerbaijan.
Turkey's position in the Caucasus is stronger than ever, and the opening of the borders would only increase the loyalty of the local population to Ankara. Analysts are confident of this. Nevertheless, some experts believe that the borders between Turkey and Armenia will not open either this year or in the foreseeable future. After all, discussions about this have been ongoing since 2020. On February 11th, 2023, it seemed that the end of the blockade was already near. At that time, the border was temporarily opened for the first time in 30 years to deliver humanitarian aid from Armenia to those affected by the severe earthquake in Turkey and Syria. Afterwards, Erdogan thanked them for their support and once again locked up his checkpoints. After all, Ankara can increase its presence in the Caucasus even without opening its borders.
This means an increase in tourism influence in Armenia, which in turn means an increase in tourism influence in the Caucasus. But they say, sorry, but there is a personal political promise from Mr. Erdogan to Mr. Aliyev. So despite the fact that we understand that the normalization of Armenian-Turkish relations is beneficial for Turkey, Azerbaijan is still more important than Armenia.
The only thing all experts agree on is that no matter how events unfold in Turkish-Armenian relations, they will be much better than those between the Caucasus countries and today's Russia. In recent years, Russia has lost all its former influence over the region, yielding this position to Turkey.
Russia will be completely pushed out of the region if this is true. And it seems that it has no levers or any means to influence this. In other words, the time has already been lost. Everything Russia could have done needed to be done in 2020.
The president of Kazakhstan also refused to support Russia's war against Ukraine despite pressure from the Kremlin. Last month, he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during the UN General Assembly in New York. And even earlier in August, Tokayev stated that he supports international security guarantees to ensure Ukraine's independence. More details in the following report.
Ukrainian President Zelensky and Kazakh President Tokayev met in New York for the first time since 2019. On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Tokayev stated that it is time to sit down at the negotiating table, although he did not directly condemn Russia.
Kazakhstan remains concerned about the crisis around Ukraine, which continues to inflict serious harm on civilians, undermine global trust, and weaken international security. Nevertheless, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts to resolve this conflict should continue.
Kazakhstan seems to maintain neutrality regarding the Russia-Ukraine war and offers its mediation services.
Kazakhstan initially offered its services as a possible mediator or as a venue for negotiations between the two opposing sides. This position has not changed.
But as they say, the devil is in the details. There are many details in Kazakhstan's relations with Russia and Ukraine. For example, Kazakhstan refused to cooperate with Moscow on building a nuclear power plant. China will build it instead. Also, according to Kazakh authorities, they are preventing Russia from circumventing Western sanctions.
We are taking measures to ensure that our territory is not used to bypass these sanctions. Various comprehensive measures are currently being diligently taken, including the meticulous tracking of goods, the advanced online tracking of these very goods, and even the thoughtful creation of a highly specialized website where you can conveniently check whether a particular company or a specific product is indeed present on the official sanctions list. This valuable resource is known as traderradar.ca. I think all our exporters are aware of this and accordingly comply with it.
And the president also stated that he does not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called LNR and DNR.
We do not officially recognize Taiwan, nor do we recognize Kosovo, nor indeed South Abkhazia, nor South Ossetia, nor Abkhazia itself. And quite apparently, this fundamental principle will be applied to your state territory as well. In our considered view, this specifically refers to the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk.
Naturally, Russian politicians and propagandists cannot tolerate such audacity and regularly threaten Kazakhstan with war, claiming the same thing as with Ukraine, that these are supposedly originally Russian territories.
And if we don't resolve the issue with Ukraine, then we'll have problems with Kazakhstan and with Armenia and with other countries that surround us. With
Kazakhstan? Well,
of course. Well, just look at what's happening in Kazakhstan today in terms of, so to speak, building a kind of Kazakh state. What kind of national mythology is flourishing there about independence, about switching to the Latin alphabet? There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there if you take a closer look.
The situation in Ukraine is clearly being mirrored in Kazakhstan. There are also huge regions there populated by Russian speakers.
In Kazakhstan, some people believe that in the future we want to, as they say, seize northern Kazakhstan from them according to the Ukrainian scenario. What do you think? Did we ever have such plans? Do we have any designs on that?
We have historical rights to that land. It's an industrial region. These are cities that were built by our ancestors. Why did we give them away in '91? On what basis?
Because of this, Kazakhstan created a list of Russian citizens who are banned from entering the country. This list includes about a dozen deputies of the Russian State Duma, as well as the notorious Tina Kandelaki, the ideologist of the Russian world Dugin, and the late husband of propagandist Simonyan.
Oh, Kazakhs, my dear brothers and sisters, what kind of profound ingratitude is this that you are displaying? Please take a very good and careful look at the current situation in Ukraine, and truly think deeply and seriously about the implications. If you genuinely believe that you can continue to be so incredibly sly and cunning, and that absolutely nothing negative will happen to you because of your actions, then you are profoundly and gravely mistaken.
President Zelensky has repeatedly stated, citing intelligence data, that Russia has military plans for Kazakhstan.
So the information we received indicated that among their priorities are the Baltic countries, Moldova, and Kazakhstan. These are the closest targets for the Russian Federation.
The president of Kazakhstan stated that he would suppress any attempts at separatism, while Kazakh deputies went further and laid claims to territories that are part of Russia.
As responsible and conscientious citizens, we must actively oppose any manifestations of radicalism, extremism, and separatism. We need to be both delicate and at the same time firm in our approach, and ultimately we must always stand for justice and fairness.
We need to understand that Novosibirsk, for example, is not Novosibirsk, it's Novy Sobor. These are our Kazakh territories. Tyumen is the southern region of the Golden Horde, which means that even beyond Tyumen further north, those are also our territories. Orenburg, not Orenburg, but Ornborg, and at one time it was the capital of the Kazakh state.
There was also a lot of different information from intelligence, for example, that Putin demanded that Tokayev supply weapons for the war with Ukraine, and after Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries, he begged Kazakhstan for gasoline. At the same time, Putin constantly humiliatingly mixes up Tokayev's first name and patronymic, and he probably does it on purpose.
Everyone knows that the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, appealed for help to the members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization.
So, Ilham Aliyev spoke, and dear Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, it's good to see you again. So, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said that somewhere it's about 27 billion. Dear Kassym-Jomart Tokayev,
Putin's plan was to draw Kazakhstan into the so-called Union State, following the example of Belarus, but he failed. Tokayev simply mocked such proposals.
Recently, the president of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Ivanovich Koshenko, suggested that Kazakhstan join the Union State, but I appreciate the joke for what it is. I don't think there's any need for this, since there are other integration associations. First and foremost, the Eurasian Economic Union. As for nuclear weapons, we don't need them.
Even those who seem to be Russia's closest allies understand that it's impossible to trust terrorists and murderers, so they need to be kept at a distance and, if possible, support those who oppose them.
And what do you think about Russia's declining influence in the world? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates, and don't forget to like the video. A single sky above our heads.